Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to do a lesson on measurement. And measurement helps us find out how big something is. So come join me and let's learn some things about measurement today. Hey kiddos! Good morning. It's a beautiful sunny day this morning. So we're going to talk a little bit about measurement today. All right. So we want to use measurement to help us find out how big something is. And that might mean we want to find out how long a table is, or how tall a giraffe is, or how heavy we are. We can measure how heavy we are. Or when we're baking, we have to use measurement so we know how much of an ingredient to put into what we're making. All right? So we can measure length. That's one thing that we can measure, which is how long something is. Maybe it's as long as 8 cubes. Like if I measure this pencil, it could be 8 cubes long. Or it could be 7 inches long. We can also measure height, like how tall something is, how tall a giraffe is, or how tall we are. We could use a yardstick to help us figure that out. We could check our heights on the wall and then measure how tall we are, like 5 feet tall. So in measurement, there are things called non-standard measurement and standard measurement. So with non-standard measurement, it's sometimes harder to get an accurate or an exact answer because we would measure with things like our hands. And if I measure with my hand is much bigger than your hand, so we probably wouldn't get the same answer when we measured something. I might measure across the bottom of my easel and say it's 1, 2, 3, a little bit more than 3 hands long. But I'll bet if you measured the same thing with your hands, you would have it being longer than I did because our hands are different sizes. So it's not always accurate. We could measure with things like paper clips, and we might get an answer that my pencil maybe is 5 paper clips long. But with paper clips, I would have to line them up exactly to get my answer. So non-standard measurement just makes it harder for us to get an exact answer. So usually what we use is something called standard measurement. And standard measurement gives us real tools to use for when we're measuring. And those tools will help us get an accurate or more exact answer. For example, we would use something like a ruler, and we could measure that pencil. Again, we could measure that pencil and find out that it's 6.5 inches long. Or we could measure our height, like Mrs. Hess's height is 5 feet 6 inches tall. So we can get a more exact answer. And because we're using the same tools for each of us to measure with, that will help us all get the same answer. Okay? So some other things that we can measure with standard measurement, we could use our ruler, we could use a tape measure, we could use a scale, we could use a teaspoon for ingredients when we're baking. All right, so I just wanted to give you a little overview of measurement today and how it helps us decide how big something is or how much of something we need to use. All right, so I want to show you one thing that we're going to focus on today is the length. All right, so we're going to focus on length today. All right, so our length, and if we use our standard measurement and we use our inches or on a ruler or inches on a tape measure or a yardstick, we can decide how long something is, how wide something is, or how tall something is. All right? So we could look at the length of a snake. How long is a snake? And we could measure. We could decide how narrow something is or how wide something is. We could look at how tall something is or even how short something is. All right, so some of those standard units that we would use would be an inch, a foot, yard, or a mile. So we could measure something in inches, like the pencil we talked about. You could measure something in feet, like how tall Mrs. Hess is. We used feet and inches. We could measure how many yards something is. Like on a football field, it's 100 yards long. Or we could measure the distance of something in miles. To get from my house up to Wegmans is about 12 miles in the car. So miles, we usually travel in the car. Or if you're a runner, you can measure how many miles you might run. All right, so this is just an example of some of those tools: a ruler, the yardstick, or the measuring tape. So in your activities that are coming home for next week, we're going to actually have you doing some measurement. So I hope this helped you understand what measurement is and the difference between non-standard measurement and standard measurement.